Thank you for joining us today for this webcast, Innovation in Physical Consumer Products, the Age of the Digital Consumer, presented by the Pittsburgh Venture Capital Association's Emerging Leadership Board. I'm Adam Wicks, the chair of the Emerging Leadership Board. I'm also a venture and M&A attorney at Buchanan Ingersoll and Rooney here in Pittsburgh. Before we begin the program, I would first like to thank all of our annual sponsors. We obviously would not be here without their generosity and support. Programs like these are only possible because of them. And if you're interested in joining us and becoming a sponsor, please contact Kelly Shako, the president of the Pittsburgh Venture Capital Association. Our panelists today represent a wide range of backgrounds, products, and customers, from energizing eye drops to sleepwear for new mothers to living air purifiers. Today's program will feature key insights on launching physical consumer products in today's digital world. So I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to today's moderator, Matt Berlinich, who works in manufacturing initiatives at Innovation Works and is also the founder of On the Rocks. Matt, go ahead.
Thanks for that introduction, Adam. I'm very excited to be here today with our panelists who are all recent and current Alpha Lab year companies. So we have, first off, Kelsey Abernathy and Dan Fusich of Algenair. They represent a deep technical understanding. Both have PhDs, and their company Algenair makes living air purifiers. I'll let them provide some additional insight after I introduce everybody. So we have Kyleguinness, who comes to us from University of Pittsburgh's Big Idea competition and has been plugging away at Revitalize for years now. We've chatted on and off over the years, and we're really excited to have you in Alpha Lab year now as you approach going to market. And then last but not least, we have Lindsay Applebaum-Stewart, who comes to us with a really deep and awesome perspective on a whole array of marketing from her current and former experience in working for tech-enabled umbrella startup and now with Mamalux. So let's start with Algenair, give a little bit more depth on your product and where you're coming to us from.
Hi, my name is Kelsey. I'm one of the co-founders of Algenair, and we develop living technology that improves health and wellness of building occupants. Our first product is the Arium, and it's a consumer natural air purifier that uses algae to reduce carbon dioxide and increase oxygen as effectively as having 25 plants in a room.
How about Kyle?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kyleguinness. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Revitalize Energy. We're taking to market an energizing eye drop designed to help kind of combat the effects of screen fatigue. I think we can all agree that more and more events are looking more like this online, and Revitalize is designed to combat the effects of prolonged screen exposure.
And Lindsay. Oh, you're on mute, Lindsay.
I always do that. I'm Lindsay, the founder of Mamalux. We launched this past fall with the first and only all-in-one leak-proof sleepwear for breastfeeding.
Awesome. And I also realized I didn't give any additional background on myself. So I manage the manufacturing initiatives at Innovation Works, known as the Scalable Innovation Program, all designed at connecting hardware startups with local manufacturers, as well as bolstering the manufacturing ecosystem to make Southwestern Pennsylvania one of the best places in the world to start a physical product company. And then on the side, I also have bootstrapped and developed my own physical product, which I launched before coming to IW through a successful Indiegogo campaign and still run to this day on the side now, thanks to my parents being my employees. So let's get started. So I think the number one question that I have that always comes up is, why are D2C hardware startups so attractive to founders? We get so many applications in this vein, but yet they are both so hard to succeed with and so difficult to get funding for. So let's kick it to you first, Lindsay. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges and why is it so appealing?
Well, it's appealing, I think, because a physical product is something you can really form a connection to right away. It can be more than a concept. I have, for me personally, I saw a need in the market. So for this physical product, so I knew that, if someone was, if I could create this, then I could get other people to believe in it too. I think what's hard is obviously having the cash up front because, if you have a technical background, maybe you can start working on an app or something like that, but you really need cash in order to even get a prototype going.
I definitely agree with that. How about Algenair? And Kelsey?
For sure. I think the long and short of it is that the D2C life chose us, right? I think that, generally I tend to be obsessed with things and physical products in the world and just loving how those tangible things work and interact with each other. Obviously my background in biology is more conceptual, and a lot of the times in a molecular lab, we're thinking about high-level concepts and really distilling them down into cartoons of how intracellular mechanisms work. And what was really amazing is just to bring the research in the lab and have a tangible product that non-scientists can use and really incorporate biology into their everyday lives. That process has just been wildly entertaining and certainly more fun than finishing a dissertation, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. Kyle?
Yeah, I think going off of that, one of the things that's so appealing is a lot of us are trying to solve problems that we experience or that are experienced by people close to us or that we can at least relate to. But that kind of transitions to the challenges side of things. If these are problems that we can relate to and we're everyday people, they've existed. And yet there's no solutions. And there's no solutions because the solutions don't solve the problem in a way that we want it to be solved because it's so difficult to get a physical product off the ground. Whether it's because of those high upfront costs, whether it's because of distribution, it's inherently more challenging, which is why these problems tend to still exist.
That is a really great point. And that's probably one of the number one questions that I get from new early stage founders is this: how much does it cost to get a physical product started, and how long should I expect it to take? And speaking from my own experience, I can say that, it took me probably about 18 months from fiddling around with an idea to fulfilling on the crowdfunding campaign. And in that time frame, it cost me about $100,000. And my product is very simple. It's like 3 molded components. And that alone cost $100,000, $30K in tooling, $40K in parts, $30K in fulfillment. So that neglects all of the time which I put into Kelsey's point of, or actually Lindsay's point of me being a technical an engineer. I was able to use the skills that I had to do all of my own prototyping, so that doesn't factor into any of my time or that you would normally have to pay somebody else for, functioning very much like a software startup would, where your biggest costs are labor of yourself working on the code. Can you give our audience a little bit of perspective on how much time have you guys put in, how much money have you put in so far, and where are you right now? So Kyle, you were just providing that insight, so why don't we kick it off?
Yeah, I was just kind of itemizing everything, and I don't exactly like looking at the price tag so much. But for us, from the perspective of starting the development process, after we kind of did some more needs identification, it took us about 13 months to actually develop our formulation. And those costs were about $25,000 between raw materials, labor, facilities, things like that. Now, on top of that, we now have the OTC Pathway, which involves about $45,000 in additional testing, additional facilities, and then the CGMP manufacturing, which is looking at another $55,000. All of this in terms of timeline The development process was about 13 months. That testing and manufacturing process takes anywhere from 6 to 8 additional months. So it's a very involved process. It's very costly. And that's why you don't see as many startups in this type of space, because it's still regulated and there's still things you have to do that you can't really sidestep.
Makes total sense. OTC, over the counter, just for this.
Yeah, specifically the OTC pathway. If we would be tacking on several zeros if this was like a new drug product that we had to go through the new drug FDA approval process. We're just an OTC product, so we can be purchased without a prescription or anything.
Very good point. So your product physically goes into somebody's body. Lindsay, yours goes onto somebody's body, and is a soft good, which is something that I always struggle with finding support locally for people who are looking for contract manufacturers. Can you give us an idea of sort of your development timeline?
Yeah, it definitely took more time and money than I expected. From the time I had the idea, it probably took about 2.5 years to get to Kickstarter fulfillment. But if we count from when I really took action and started prototyping, it was about a year of prototyping and testing, plus then 3 months to actually get from the start of manufacturing to fulfillment. Cost wise, it was around $75K, which a lot of that was my own money. And that, includes development, manufacturing, and marketing. But like I said, I sort of wish I had known going into it that, oh, this is more than $5,000, which you kind of think, oh, it's going to be easy. And then you run into more and more kind of challenges and you learn along the way. And yeah, so when people say you're going to need like twice as much as you think, I would multiply that a few more times.
And how about Kelsey?
Yeah, absolutely. To add to that, thinking it would only be $5,000 and it'd be so much more. I remember the first time we placed an order for a piece of inventory and it was 1,000 pieces of glass. And the concept of ordering 1,000 of something was just so mind-boggling at the time. And I think it was like $8,000, which now is like, okay, like this is just something we have to order. But at the time, I was like, I've never spent that much money on a single item in my entire life. And for Dan and I, we started Algenair while we were in grad school. So we really had no money and kind of had to figure out how were we going to bootstrap it. And so we were able to do pitch competitions and kind of pick up little prizes here and there. And because of that, our goal was just, we need to put something on the market as soon as possible to just start selling and start building that customer base. So we were able to, in about 12 months and roughly $50,000, go from a drawing on a napkin, sitting at a bar, talking about Dan's research, to launching our website and saying, okay, like we're ready for pre-orders, which was kind of a wild experience.
For sure. And we definitely did it on the fail fast, fail cheap. I mean, the like that writing that check for 8K, I was like, I didn't know numbers went that high. So it was pretty shocking. But yeah, you go to design firms for hardware, and because you're leveraging their experience versus a biologist who's just trying to scrap around with a 3D printer. But yeah, they came back with price tags that were untenable for even just one prototype. So we did it the scrappy way, and I learned CAD and bought a 3D printer, and we just iteratively designed over time. And that's the thing, is having to learn all of that process takes time. So what we didn't have in the high price tag of launching the product and putting a product in people's homes, we had to make up for in a slow roll of, okay, how do you build something in 3D space, and how do we prototype, how do we make it? How do we find a manufacturer that'll work with us and actually hand pour molds and deal with all the headaches and growing pains? But we certainly did it over time, with it definitely in stages, picking up one $5,000 check after another, and just getting something on the market. But if you're not embarrassed by the product that you first put out, you're waiting too long. So we definitely felt that.
That is a great translation of the whole like agile product development, lean startup methodology to the physical product space, which is, in my opinion, absolutely critical for success. And the fact that you've learned and done all of those things brings me to my next point is it's really hard to do this alone, if not impossible. So where did everybody on the panel here comes from? Well, doesn't come from outside this region, but because we have Kyle here, hometown hero, and myself, but we've all had experience working with support systems and organizations, both inside and outside the region. What's something that you found that's been particularly helpful within the region, and what's been a particular strength or useful partner or resource outside the region? So Dan, why don't you keep rolling with it, since you were just talking about teaching yourself CAD.
I was amped. I'm so amped for this question. I mean, also, if I can have a little bit of credit, I am a Duke in class of 2015. So I'm coming back to Pittsburgh. So it's amazing to be back in Pittsburgh. And right now we're talking to board manufacturers. And what's really awesome about Western PA is that people make things. Hardware is made, in Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh region. And to be quite honest, that's why we're back, and we're super excited to be back and shorten supply chains and have things made in the United States, which is so great. So we came from Baltimore, Maryland, University of Maryland graduates, where we did our doctorates, and with the medical device community there, they're seriously invested in that. You've got a lot of players there, Johns Hopkins. So medical devices is huge in that Baltimore area. But spending time in Kansas City, they're huge in architecture. Obviously, Boston, Silicon Valley gets huge checks written, and just regionally being able to see and understand the climate. It's incredible to see that people make things in Western PA, and that's why we need to be where people make things, because we're trying to make things.
I didn't even have to pay him to say that.
Exactly. But yeah, and I realize that's a very distilled opinion, so there's a lot of nuance to that, and I'd love to hear more from people that are more on the panel that are more knowledgeable and less simple-minded than myself.
That's a great point. I'd love to hear Lindsay's perspective on this too, because to my point of what I was saying earlier, like if you're looking for machine shops or electronics contract manufacturers, it's a very different world than if you're looking for cut and sew.
Yeah, I think for my particular industry, there are so many strengths and wonderful things about being in Pittsburgh. I think as far as the actual industry, I have had a lot of success with my networks in New York and DC, and kind of places where maybe there's a little bit more of a retail focus. This is a very, in my opinion, a very tech focused city right now, which is wonderful. So for me, I think the best part about being in Pittsburgh is just the networking, the small town feel, people really rooting for each other. And there's some amazing programs. I have to shout out the Ascender boot camp, because I don't think I would have even gotten to the revenue generating stage without them really helping me formulate a business plan. And then obviously, Innovation Works has helped a ton too. But yeah, I think the people are here. There's wonderful people here who can help, no matter what your industry is.
Awesome. Kyle, you also came through Ascender at a point, right?
Yeah, I also have to give major credit to Ascender. They did a very, very good job of taking my very buzzed thoughts and trying to put them to paper on how to actually create a business plan to get from point A to point B. And I'll also give a lot of credit to the Big Idea Center associated with the University of Pittsburgh. They did a really good job of kind of fostering that creative attitude for me as a student, and kind of connecting me to the right people. Matt, you can attest, I've probably had 3 or 4 conversations with you going, hey, what should I do? And Pittsburgh does a very, very good job of kind of building this startup pipeline and connecting you with people along the way that support you as you go through it. And I think that's where Pittsburgh's really strong, because to Lindsay's point, there is that small town feel. And the connections here are very, very powerful. And that's what kind of makes the difference. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, you have to go to outside markets that may be a little bit bigger for getting connected to cities or landscapes that are a bit more focused on consumer goods. But in terms of the bare bones, building a business plan, getting an MVP to market, connecting you to the right people, Pittsburgh does a fantastic job.
That's awesome. And speaking of connecting with customers in difficult to access markets, now that is the best time, is better than ever with digital marketing at our fingertips. It's never been easier to access your customers online. But at the same time, because of that, there is more noise now than ever before online. And so it presents its own sort of difficulties, especially with rapidly evolving algorithms and privacy policies and all of that. It's just a lot there. And I would love to hear from everybody on the panel. What are you doing right now to find your customers and then communicate with them and stand out from the rest of the noise? So I know that Kelsey, you've given some great examples of your success with TikTok, which is still a complete mystery to me. And I swear I'm a millennial. I'm like, I should know this, I feel, but.
I mean, for the amount of time I've spent on that app, it's still a mystery to me as well, to be honest. But it's been really interesting to learn. When we first started marketing, we were doing Facebook and Instagram ads, and that seemed to work fairly well. But we noticed with like iOS 14 updates and just over time that while that was still a good source of finding customers, it wasn't a way to connect with customers or build any sort of community. And our product is a very unique product. It's not something that anyone is necessarily initially looking for. They're looking for the solution, but not the product. So you need more of a conversation and with your customers. And TikTok has allowed us to do that because I can sit here and I can talk to them and I can show them the product and I can answer their questions and interact with them in a way that we couldn't when we were just looking at Facebook or Instagram. And so that's been kind of a great experience to really build a community around our product as well as just reaching out to customers.
That's a great point. Lindsay, when we were talking before, you are across a whole wide range of platforms and strategies. Can you talk to some other strategies which you found effective at finding and engaging with your customers?
Yeah, for us, advertising on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, those have actually been really successful. And that's really where the bulk of our sales are coming from right now. We're also doing affiliate programs and working with influencers. But I will say that even with all of that, I've still kind of had the most valuable customer connections through my own networks. I'm part of a local mom group with over 1,000 moms. And I found those moms to be so helpful in helping me develop the product and then test it and then buy it. Also just being in the local media, I've had a lot of sales come from some of my press, the press I've gotten locally. So it's a real balance between the more traditional kind of methods of finding customers and then obviously all the digital resources that we have now.
Yeah. Have you seen much of an uptick with as a result of COVID and these sort of what used to be more physical support systems and groups and having greater engagement in the digital format for them, like a mom's group?
Oh yeah. I mean, with my son, my oldest, I was in person at all the meetings. You would sit in a circle and talk about with your baby and talk about all the problems, and struggles of being a new mom. But now it's all on Facebook. So you actually sort of benefit from having even more voices and more advice and, more people to speak with. So it's actually kind of been a weird blessing in a way.
Yeah, that's what they say, right? Every adversity breeds new opportunity.
Yeah.
I will say, Kyle, you have done so much and you're in a unique position, right? Because you you have to go through the regulatory pathway of this. So you still haven't been able to actually sell your product to your customers, but I think you've done a great job of utilizing a wide range of ads and analytical tools through digital marketing to learn about your customers and plan for your eventual launch.
Yeah, it was definitely what we tried to do was kind of use Facebook as the beginning of our pipeline to figure out which audiences would something like this resonate with. Because you can obviously make the argument, well, everybody's tired. Everybody looks at screens. That doesn't help you when you're actually trying to market a product to a specific niche. So one thing that we did is we used preliminary data from Facebook to identify segments that responded well. And then we tried to pursue some alternative media forms to have some more in-depth conversations. So what this looked like for us is we got data from Facebook and Instagram that gamers really resonated with this product, which makes sense. So we got connected to a couple gaming groups associated with universities, and we asked to get put in their Discord. And what we then could do was talk to them pretty directly, say, look, these are our thoughts, tell us what you think. And it got very, very intimate feedback from, aside from just trying the product. We did do focus groups with people to kind of track their comments for use of the product, but on a larger scale to get a lot of touches with members of who we think our demographics are going to be. That was a really good way of doing it, kind of finding those one-off forms of media that can really cut through the noise a little bit better than just another Facebook ad, another Instagram ad, something like that.
Absolutely. And that's something that I feel is really valuable insight, but also I think it's still possible to do that very wrong. Especially during crowdfunding campaigns or when people are sort of desperate for their push, they'll go to groups like that and put out their ask immediately, back my campaign. And it's sort of the wrong place at the wrong time, and it falls on deaf ears or will in some cases get you ejected from platforms or audiences like that. So Kyle, what have you done to sort of like really get the engagement in those Discord platforms? And then same follow up to everybody.
So it's interesting that you bring up putting the ask at the wrong time, because when we did our crowdfunding campaign, we had built this huge email list. We were super excited about it, and talk about putting the ask at the wrong time. We put out an email blast, and the open rate was abysmal, and the unsubscribe rate was quite high. Not exactly what we were looking for, but for the specific communities that we found, one thing that was helpful was, and this seems kind of counterintuitive, was the communities were not overwhelmingly large. Obviously, if you look at the market niche as a whole, yeah, it has size. But for example, the Discord group that we did a lot of work with was only a couple hundred people. And what that did was it gave us a sample size we were comfortable with and comfortable engaging with, but it didn't feel overwhelming. And because of that, the people that we were associating with and talking to, they didn't feel like we were just a company kind of coming quickly in, asking for something and leaving. It was much easier to have kind of a back and forth. And for us, what it really looked like was we had a referral for getting added to that group. And we were very, very upfront from the beginning. We said, hey, this is how we got connected. We're looking for some feedback. Can anybody help us out? And they were really, really receptive to that. Being open and honest was definitely the best.
That's awesome. And also the referral, I'm sure, helps to sort of anchor you into that community. Same thing with you, Lindsay. Being a new mom, having been active in these groups, you're an established sort of member of that community. Could you talk to that? And also, I'm very curious about the affiliate side of things and what do you do? Because that's another angle that requires a special sort of approach and developing that relationship to get the right creative out of it and the right ask.
Yeah, it's for me, that's been kind of the one area where I've needed to outsource help. you can't spread yourself too thin with every platform is so different. So yeah, for the affiliate, I found someone to sort of who's been in, working in the space and could help me sort of, build out a good program, make people feel, like they're a valuable contributor to your business. Sometimes that involves giving them a free product to try out so they can actually love it before they start selling it and earning commissions on it. The other kind of interesting, more recent development with affiliates is that now for if you want to get press in a lot of these like big media outlets, you have to have an affiliate network. So even just to have your product in Forbes or CNN or anything like that, they want a cut. So just kind of being there is helpful, just to hopefully get that kind of coverage one day.
That's really interesting. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, most of them.
And that I think is a really great takeaway too, is that you can't do everything well. You can't be everywhere. Sort of like, Dan, you taught yourself to use a 3D printer, which is great in the initial run, but eventually you come to a point where you have to outsource certain things. Kelsey and Dan, could you guys talk to something that you've had to identify somebody with the right talents for and take that off of your plate?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I can riff for the moment on the hardware side, as that's kind of what I'm running the ship on there. But yeah, you're exactly right. Is for the MVP, I could solder a few things together and not electrocute myself, and that was great. But eventually, you do have to outsource that to somebody that's qualified. And when you do, as you get a little revenue, you can make your product better over time and make sure that the product that we were shipping on day one is a lot different and a lot worse than the product that we're shipping today. So like making those improvements over time comes with going through leaning on Kelsey, if you want to speak to that for a moment.
That is the legal department of Algenair in the background. Yeah, outsourcing for hardware and going from that prototype to manufacturer ready is something that we've definitely had to outsource. And I'll say other things, like one of the best things we've ever outsourced was accounting. We did our taxes for the first 2 years. We did the accounting because we're saving money. It's this, and finally at a point where it's like, neither of us enjoy this. This is a skill that we don't really want to spend the time to learn. And it just takes so much off our plate to have someone else who is an expert in it and does it. And our accountant's amazing. Like, she does everything in like an hour that would take me like weeks to do. I will say an experience of outsourcing that didn't work out and we're actually now having to do internally for us was a lot of marketing. Dan and I both come from science backgrounds. Like, we will admit upfront, like, marketing is one of our weakest skills. And so we've always leaned on hiring marketing firms or branding firms. And over time, I've just realized that the content that we generate and that we're posting on Instagram and TikTok, like, that is what's engaging with our customers more than paying someone else to do that for us. Now, I will say we outsource actually the running of the Facebook ads and all the behind the scenes work, but actually like creating a lot of that content and posting in general, it had to come from us. And it took us a while to realize that like we were the best people to market our product because we understood it.
I'm seeing a lot of head nods here from the panel. Everybody seems to agree with that point. I know I certainly do. That is something that I think should be a really underscored, highlighted takeaway from this panel, is that it's not even the same. Kyle, you mentioned email marketing. Like a marketing agency that does email is not necessarily going to be great at Facebook or TikTok or Pinterest, or each platform has its own subtleties. And ultimately, I've found, and I'm curious to see if everybody agrees, a similar situation with Kelsey. The content, the creative, like, in order to actually understand and engage with your customers, that ultimately has to start with you. Yeah. That does sort of parlay into the next question pretty well, actually. I'm pretty pleased with myself there. I think that is very common with early stage companies is that we start with a product because, like Lindsay said, we have a connection to it. We think of ourselves as the customer. Would everybody say that you sort of started in your business with the assumption that you were your target customer, and how has that grown over time to help you, how you use these tools to sort of narrow in on who is your actual ideal customer? How has that changed, and how do you anticipate that changing as you scale to new stages as well? Kyle, you're nodding. So,
well, it's interesting because I mean, there's nothing wrong with being part of your own target market. The problem comes when you think that's the only market that would want your product, and the only reason they would want that product is for the same reason you would want it. So one thing that we found is, I was of course thinking when I was coming conceptually, when I was in college, I was like, this is perfect for college students. And you know, as well with gamers, I spend a lot of time gaming. This is exactly what I'd be looking for. When we did additional testing on some other market segments, and especially with our focus groups, we found that the product also resonated with people in working in food service, people working in delivery, or people working in hospitality. And the reason they liked it was less for the relief and of screen fatigue, and more the fact that it's easy to use and they can keep it on their person for multiple doses. I wasn't thinking about that as much. So there's not a problem with being part of the demographic you think you want to market to. You just have to understand that there's other demographics that you might not have as much in common with that might want the product for very, very different reasons. And you have to be open to that feedback as well.
yeah. So focus groups have been particularly helpful for you in getting that feedback and expanding your understanding of your market. Lindsay, you have a very intuitive and intimate understanding of your customer, as it was a pain point for yourself that you solved. How have your understandings grown from all of the different efforts that you've done, both in person and digitally?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm undoubtedly my customer, which is a mom. But it sort of took me a while to realize that while I immediately, could see the value of my product because I created it, a new mom might not know that she needs this. So I think just learning how to talk to different segments of my customers, the second time moms we've seen through our Facebook ads, they get it right away. But if someone's pregnant for the first time, they need a little bit more of an understanding of why this product would be valuable for them. So I think just figuring out, like Kyle said, like who all the different people are. And then you have to just kind of change your messaging for each one.
Yeah. Kelsey and Dan, what have you guys experienced?
Go ahead, Kelsey, you go first, then I'll riff on what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I kind of liked what Kyle mentioned about learning other customer segments and how people are using your product. I think that's something that's been very interesting for Dan and I, is that what we think the product is used for, sometimes our customers have other ideas. And not necessarily in a bad way, but you can think of all the ways that you could interact with your product, and you give it to someone else and learn that there's a whole bunch of new ways you didn't even think of. And so that's been kind of interesting, learning that for some people it is about air quality, where for others it's about having something green in their home because they don't have a green thumb. They don't like plants, but they want something green. And for other people, it's, I have plants, I love plants, this works with my plants. And so finding out that there are more customers than you initially realized, and how do you reach out to them?
Yeah, those are all great points. Complete agree. I think one of the biggest revelations that I was able to tap into was for largely, again, not a marketer, So as a scientist and as a guy who likes to talk to engineers and they're so awesome, and I'll have 3 ideas and they'll come up with 18 reasons why they're not feasible, and then we work on problem solving and getting to the answer. But I digress. So as a biologist with a engineering interest, I should say, I would be talking about the product in terms of, look at all these specifications, the flow rate, it has the oxygen production capacity of this, and like, look at all these specs, it's so cool. It's like, that's awesome, until you realize that on the marketing side, people do not pull out their credit card based on logic and reason. They pull out their credit card based on emoting a certain feeling about your product, and then they can backfill that emotion with the specifications and the stats and all of the data. So that was a huge disconnect coming from that, how my mind works in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, versus the marketing side of, like, you're not telling the story of your own product well to your own target customers, and they're using it in ways that you never imagined. And that's one of the biggest revelations that I've had over the last, 6 months of this timeline. So crucial.
How did you learn that? What particular data or tool or feedback mechanism did you come to that?
That's a great question. Very bluntly, talking to people that are more intelligent than myself and are marketers, like D2C marketers for consumer products, because they can understand how their customers make purchasing decisions a lot better than I can by looking at the statistics and product specifications. You don't sell processors by giving it the processor speed. You say blazing fast, right? How can you relate the specifications to messaging that everyday consumers understand? Further than that, just speaking with our customers, getting on the phone. How do you use the product? And really having open-ended conversations and asking questions that don't end in a yes or a no, so we can understand, how do you interact with it every day? What do you do? What do you do when it gets dark? What's your there's a recurring revenue situation where we provide fresh algae, sterile nutrients in a hydrophobic lab grade filter to prevent contamination. It's like, okay, how do you know when to make that purchasing decision? Is it when the algae gets too dark, which it is, but understanding the fact that people don't understand that when the culture reaches maximum growing capacity, okay, it needs to be changed and it needs vital nutrients. And explaining that biological concept in terms that are graspable for anyone to understand. I think what biologists and scientists have the worst time doing, and what one of our worst skills is, how do you explain your high-level research to your grandmother? And if you can't explain it to your grandmother, you don't understand it yourself, and that's so crucial.
For sure. We've done a lot of talking about all of the incredible tools and ability to talk directly to our customers. And I think that we've glossed over one elephant in the room, which is, in the past, success in the consumer markets has always been about what's your ability to get into retail. So what role does retail play in your growth path right now? And then this, I suspect, will be very different for each of your companies, being in very different industries and stages. So do you plan to be a D2C company forever? Do you plan to go retail distribution or rely on that? And how does it differ at different phases? So, let's start with Algenair, because you guys had just mentioned the subscription recurring revenue model with your algae.
Yeah, so because we're selling a living organism, it's always been difficult for us to think brick and mortar retail store because of this live component. But what we've been open to more recently is e-commerce distribution channels, and we work with people like Brookstone, Sharper Image, Touch of Modern. So we're still reaching our customers online, but when we sell through them, they have 14 million subscribers to their email list alone. And that's allowed us to access a far larger customer base than we could right now with just a regular paid marketing. And so we've seen that as a path to grow on the consumer side. I'll say also, as far as do we want to be D2C forever, for us, our technology is scalable, and a vision for Algenair is not just the area in which is a one-room solution, but integrating into architecture and creating entire building solutions. And so working with distribution channels is a way to stabilize the consumer product while we focus on that larger vision as well and get the balance of both.
That makes sense. Kyle, you'd made a really good point in our discussion earlier, our prep session, about retail is not just retail, but it's also, are you in the right place for your customers? And it's sort of having the D2C experience gives you a better understanding of who your customers are and where they're going to shop. What role does retail play in your go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, I mean, for us, retail is definitely the goal, because we see brick and mortar locations as a fantastic way to scale extremely quickly. What it really comes down to for us is, are we in the right retail spaces, and are we in the right physical locations at those retail spaces? So one thing we're balancing is, where do we want the product to be placed? And for us, what we think currently is, hey, let's adopt a strategy used by like 5-Hour Energy. Let's position ourselves, right on those checkout counters, right front and center, because we think that's a way to get a lot of eyes very quickly. And based on the feedback from those brick and mortar locations, we can figure out who's purchasing the product. And based on the performance of product in each individual retail location, it's just more insight into the entirety of your consumer base as a whole. I think retail is a very powerful tool to do something like that.
Lindsay, I actually don't know where you'll fall on this. What do you think?
Well, my thinking has evolved. I did start out wanting to make Amazon a really big part of my business plan, be in Target, Buy Buy Baby, basically every big box store out there. But my thinking has really changed on this as I've spoken to other D2C founders who have kind of warned against this, spreading your brand too thin. And I think it's really important to me now to just build brand equity before I explore those retail partners and have a strong presence, I think, on our own. In the meantime, I'm just finding other brands that we can align with, for giveaways and collaborations and things like that. So they can sort of help us with the exposure and positioning without necessarily giving up too much of that control and those higher margins right away.
Yeah, that is another really great strategy for building brand equity and also reaching new market segments. So that is building that brand equity is something that takes time and money, which is another reinforcement of the why is hardware hard. What are some criticisms or roadblocks that you guys have received from investors, and how has that adjusted your fundraising strategy or your overall business strategy?
That's quite the loaded question from our standpoint. The concept of trying to use algae to fundamentally redesign and re-envision how we think about green buildings is it's a quite lofty sentence, but starting in the D2C space, we've chosen some of the hardware in the D2C space. It's almost like we've chosen the path of most resistance, and that's obviously quite daunting. So looking at that, going to investors and maybe having the conversation of, oh, we're not in the hardware space, we're scared of hardware. Oh, we're scared of D2C. Also, we're not algae investors. So we've certainly got a lot of feedback in there, because it's a pretty small Venn diagram for all of those three things. But obviously talking to investors and getting the no's is the first step to getting to the yes, and finding the actual partner that's intriguing, because the whole basis of having a polarizing idea is crucial. So having the polarization of people who see the ingenuity, those are the people that we want to work with. And to the people that are scared of algae, I don't blame you. It's more than just pond scum. It's more than just harmful algal blooms. But it does have, I mean, it's nature's best tool and solution for carbon capture, and the people that are excited about it are really excited about it, and those are the people we're excited to partner with.
Awesome. Any other additions or thoughts on that? There's some roadblocks that you received from investors. I gotta give props. This is Kyle's question, actually.
Well, if you say it's my question, I feel like I have to answer it now. So when it comes to investors, to Dan's point, we really like the fact that we're polarizing, especially when we tell people we're doing energizing eye drops. They give one of two reactions: either never talk to me again, or oh my goodness, tell me more. And that's a good thing, because the people who say tell me more, you can have some very, very interesting conversations. Now, the feedback we get from those people are, you're starting a hardware startup in probably the most regulated space with some of the highest upfront costs, and you're going to go direct to consumer, which will cut into your margins. Do you see where I'm getting at? And it's just, we have to explain we're choosing this route because of how difficult it is. And we think that because it's so difficult, it can provide some barriers from our competitors. But a lot of investors are very turned off by the fact that you're a hardware company who wants to go direct to consumer, especially at our stage where we're having a product in the market. And that's the biggest type of feedback we've gotten, is this seems great. Let's talk when you have paying customers.
Yeah, that's really crucial, Kyle. And you hit on this earlier. Just a quick addition to that is there's that big, it's hard. It's that big elephant in the room, and that challenge is the opportunity, because we're going into the blue ocean because no one else is using this technology to completely innovate and create a whole other industry. And I think that's what's really exciting, and the challenge is the opportunity. And if, as you said earlier, if it was easy, it would have already been done. And I think that's really the crucial thing that I'm hearing when you're using that language. I think that's really poignant.
Yeah, that does give it a barrier to competition. The further along the path that you get, the further you are from anybody who's going to try to compete with you, especially in a regulated industry. One thing that I like to say to people is, and I'm curious if you guys feel the same, especially in the DVC world, customers are the best and the worst part of it. You know, you get an email at midnight from a customer that just totally ruins your night, or you'll get one the next day and it just makes your day. Have you guys experienced the same thing? How does it, how do you deal with those highs and lows?
I don't want to step on anybody's toes, because I don't want to domineer here, but that question's so, like, it's so crucial. And even seeing customers that you ride the same roller coaster with the same customers of oh my, I've had 3 email exchanges with this customer and they don't understand this and that, but it's like you have to put in that work and that customer service of trying to make their customer experience as good as possible, because as low as it can get, and that customer can be just making you tear your hair out, and you ride that low roller coaster, and then they leave a 5-star review and they acknowledge that, and you can ride those roller coasters with the same people or different people over any time scale. How I choose to deal with those lows specifically, well, I mean, that's a great time to sample like local breweries, which is like my main strategy. I don't know if Lindsay and Kyle have anything more healthy to deal with it.
Yeah, well, I'm pregnant, so I'll have to just tally up all the times I need to visit the local breweries and deal with it later. I think for me, I just like in other facets of life. The highs are always, the thing that you can just sort of focus on that. The lows I think can always be fixed, in my opinion. So I have probably, I think just taking the old school approach of the customer is always right. So what can I do to make this a good experience for them? For me, that means, so, just to kind of get off the ground, I'm, offering free exchanges, free return. I'm not charging anybody. If you're not happy, I'm not happy. So just basically learning from it. If somebody wants to return a product, which thankfully it hasn't happened too much, but enough, I'm just going to use it as an experience to just tweak the product and make it slightly better so that I can avoid it next time.
That is a great attitude to have. We have 5 minutes left. We have a question from the audience, which is a good one and relevant. What are the challenges that your product benefits? What are the challenges in communicating your product's benefits with consumers through a digital media who can't touch or feel it? And has this influenced your design on the product itself? This is something that I find, it's actually with my product, it's the whole benefit of doing a DVC approach is you can't really see. If I tell people that my product makes clear ice, they're like, this guy's an idiot. Ice is clear. But when they see the ad online and they're like, that doesn't look like my ice. So it instantly captures them. I actually find that my product would never have been successful sitting on a retail shelf. But with the digital landscape, it is successful. And I'm now facing the opposite of how do I do this message that I've communicated so successfully online to grow into retail presence where I can't sell that message verbally and visually.
Yeah, I would agree. Ours is a very visual product. I mean, it bubbles, it turns different shades of green. And so that is something that we've, as I kind of mentioned before, has been difficult even in static like Facebook and Instagram ads to truly communicate this to a customer, which is where we found video formats like through Reels and TikTok, and you can pin them on Pinterest, is a way to sit there and show the customer, this is the product, this is how it works, this is what it looks like when you get the algae, this is what the algae will look like after 2 weeks, this is what the algae will look like after 6 weeks, because there is so much change that occurs there, and you can actually like show it growing through like a time lapse. So we found that video format has been really great way to communicate to our customers and also to answer their questions directly rather than just writing in a comment on something. I can sit here and I can talk about it and say, okay, this is your question. That's a great question. Let me walk you through how we got here or what the science is behind this or how do you clean it? And that's been a great way to do that.
Yeah, and in the columns that we're the concept is supported on is communicating effectively, marrying biology with engineering and art. Art is crucial, and that's been from conception and design of the product. It must be an attractive piece of home decor, and it must evoke emotion to make that purchasing decision. So hit the nail on the head there, Kelsey. Yeah.
Nobody else wants to jump in on that. We do have another question. How do you test your pricing with your customers, especially once you've gotten feedback or pushback on a given price point that you already have out there?
I can just speak quickly to this. With Mamalux, we did a lot of customer discovery before we launched, finding out what our customers were or potential customers were paying for similar products, to kind of get a sense of what they would pay for this. But honestly, the best way to test it is to launch, in my opinion. And if people are buying it, then there you go. I had a hunch. And so I, in addition to sort of like figuring out how that would work with our margins, for us, it was really just, okay, you have to like launch, and if it doesn't work, then you figure out another way. But honestly, that's the the true answer.
Yeah.
Listen to the market, right?
Yeah.
Kyle, I feel like you did some surveys or you did some testing with different landing pages, different ads, right?
Yeah, what we did, because we wanted to figure out, we need some feasibility from a margin perspective to figure out what our production runs could look like. So we needed to push the upper limit of pricing and see what that would do. So what we did is, our starting point, we found another artificial tier that sells very well on Amazon. So it follows the same distribution channel, or a similar distribution channel that we wanted to use. And on our website, we basically had the product listed at that price point, and we ran ads as if it was available for purchase. And if somebody went all the way through the purchasing, we basically just hit them with a landing page that said, "Oh, you beat us to us," or you jumped the gun. You know, we're pushing to get product available. Input your email and your contact information here, so we can keep you in the loop. And what that let us do is it let us track our conversions. It let us estimate our customer acquisition cost. It let us run some larger samples to see if, on a macro scale, this price point was feasible. Another thing you can do if you're sitting in front of your customers is you can formulate some questions with your focus groups, like how do you perceive the value of this product if you had to assign dollars to it? You can offer them tiers of how much they would pay. You just have to be careful with how you do it, so you don't fall into some common traps to kind of steer their answer to something you want. But you can definitely ask them straight up if you have them in a focus group setting, something like that.
That's a much more detailed answer and structured approach than what I just said.
There are so many ways that you could go about it too. And as with everything, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and there's always going to come a time where you'll suffer analysis paralysis, and you have to just make the decision and see if it works. So it's another element of risk tolerance. I will say that there is a method, I'm struggling to remember the name of it, like the Van something price sensitivity testing. Shout out to one of my colleagues, Jim Rubel, who wrote a startup recipe on how to do this. It's actually a systematic approach for doing essentially what Kyle described, of testing conversion rates at different price points for landing pages. And it's possible to do that really well with just Facebook ads. You can parse out traffic so you know that everybody's cold, so they have no prior influence to a price point or anchor that you've set, and get a sort of representative sampling to do that. But on that note, we are over time, and I believe that it is my responsibility to end this webcast. So I'm going to do a last call for any lightning round questions you could answer in like 20 seconds. And if not, I'd say we go around the panel and say one takeaway. What do you think is the most important piece of advice for somebody who is interested in starting a hardware consumer product company? We're not getting any questions, so the clock is ticking here. I knew I could count on you, Dan. Oh, you went back off mute.
No, I'm happy to. I'm happy to. Advice for someone to start a hardware-based business. It's the advice that I got when I first dipped my toe in, was fail fast, fail cheap. Get a product and try to release it on the market, and get feedback on it, because the market will give you an answer very strongly. The market will yell at you. So yeah, don't be afraid to talk to other people about it, and try to get an MVP as fast and as cheap as you can, because you're going to waste a lot of time and money to try to perfect it before you even release it. That's been my design thesis from the start.
I think that's a great piece of advice.
Other than that, it's been obviously a pleasure having a conversation with you all, and can't thank you enough for the time. So
Oh, thank you, Dan. Kelsey?
Yeah, I think my advice would be that there's not necessarily one right way to do anything when it comes to direct-to-consumer products. As you've seen here today, we've all had very different experiences to get where we are. So at the end of the day, like, it's like, listen to advice, get feedback, but also trust your gut. Like, you know your product better than anyone. And at the end of the day, you're the one making decisions around that product and that company. And so you have to just trust your gut and know that you know what you built.
Lindsay?
Well, Dan stole mine, which I think,
Sorry.
I mean, it really is. No, it is the best kind of, piece of advice, but I will add to that. A million people can have a great idea, but just if you actually take the steps and take action on it, you're already so far ahead of the game. So just kind of taking action really is the best piece of advice. Don't think too hard, just make it happen.
And going off of that, if you don't know where to start and if it's overwhelming, which it is, the best thing to do is try to find people who have experience with it, who've done something similar, who are actively in the physical product space. Don't be afraid to ask for help. For me, it was finding former executives from artificial tear companies and cold messaging them on LinkedIn. It's really whatever you got to do, but find some people that you think can offer some insight and figure out a starting spot and go from there, one step at a time.
I love that. I think my advice would be very similar to what Dan said, and that is, don't ask yourself how much money you need to raise in order to launch your product or scale, like hit the market. Ask yourself, what is the minimum amount of money that you need in order to take the next step towards that? And that was a piece of advice that I got from actually one of IW's portfolio companies, one of my co-founders, Mark from Rapid TPC, who said, you need to get something out there. So just get something out there, because by the time you've learned from that, you're going to have to make changes that you can't even foresee yet. So fail fast. And I did find the link to that price sensitivity test. It's called the Van Westendorp Price Sensitivity Survey. It's a methodology which I've seen several different people write about, but put a link to the chat there of the startup recipe. So I would like to thank the BVCA for this opportunity to host this panel. Thank our wonderful panelists for all of your awesome insight. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope that everybody in the audience has as well. So thank you for spending the extra 8 minutes with us, and hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.